and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, China-Czech ties. President Xi Jinping begins his first state visit to the Czech Republic in a bid to boost the economic synergy with the nation that will figure prominently in China's Belt and Road Initiative. And we sit down with former U.S.Secretary of Defense William Cohen to discuss the vital role of international trade agreements. He also shares some thoughts on the upcoming presidential election and why the U.S. Republican Party should be more focused on global concerns. And we begin today's show with President Xi Jinping's three-day state visit to the Czech Republic. President Xi arrived in Prague just hours ago on the first visit by a Chinese head of state since diplomatic ties were established 67 years ago. It's also Xi's first trip to Central and Eastern Europe as head of state. The visit signals a major diplomatic focus on Europe and also makes clear the significance of the Czech Republic as China's key cooperation partner in the Eastern and Central European countries.
A relationship on the fast track. President Xi kicks off a three-day state visit to the Czech Republic today. Xi's visit to the country is the first state visit by a Chinese president since the two countries established diplomatic ties 67 years ago. And this is also his first trip to a Central and Eastern European country, CEEC, since becoming head of state. Just before he left Beijing, President Xi published a signed article on the Bravo Daily. He called for renewing and energizing the development of China-Czech ties, with an aim to usher in a bright new era for China-CEEC cooperation and China-EU relations. The Czech Republic has become China's second biggest trade partner in the Central and Eastern European region, and China is the Czech Republic's largest trading partner outside the EU. In 2015, the volume of two-way trade between the countries topped $11 billion. Bilateral cooperation in nuclear power, finance, aviation, science, technology, and agriculture scaled new heights both in level and scale.
We do believe that there are big opportunities on the both sides, not only as concern of the trade but also investment, both Czech investment into China and Chinese investment into Czech Republic.
Both geographically and politically, the Czech Republic serves as a bridge between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. Thus, it plays an important role in the Belt and Road Initiative, in addition to 16+1 cooperation between China and CEECs. At the end of 2015, Beijing and Prague signed an MOU jointly promoting the Belt and Road Initiative, which opened up even wider prospects for bilateral exchanges and cooperation in all fields.
We are engaged in this project because we offer some participation of Czech building firms. Of course, this is excellent idea, which represents the historical experience. I think this Silk Road might again connect Europe and China.
People-to-people and cultural exchanges between the two countries are also flourishing. In 2015, 300,000 Chinese visited the Czech Republic. Bilateral cooperation on film and TV production is gaining momentum as well. Tomorrow, a reception for President Xi is scheduled at Prague Castle, with military honors that will include a ceremonial volley. Presidents are expected to meet and will likely sign a number of documents.
And for more on the discussion between China and the Czech Republic relations, we are joined here in the Beijing studio, Mr. Cui Hongjian, who is the director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir, to our program. Meanwhile, joining us from Prague in the Czech Republic, we're having Mr. Jan Kohut, who is the advisor to the president of the Czech Republic. Welcome to our program. And he's also the president of the New Silk Road Institute in Prague. Meanwhile, joining us from London in the UK, we are having Mr. Roderick Y, who is Associate Fellow of the Asia Program at Chatham House. Welcome to the three of you, gentlemen. First of all, Mr. Cui, what can we expect from the very first state visit by Chinese head of state, 67 years?
Yes, anyway, it's a long time, exactly. But I think at this time it's called a kind of a historic visit by head of state of China. So I think certainly it will give a very, very big impetus to this bilateral relation between China and the Czech Republic. Because as we know, indeed, we need a kind of a new definition of these bilateral relations, maybe a strategic one or comprehensive one. And of course, secondly, it will give more, push to this economic and trade cooperation between two countries. But of course, maybe more important thing is it gives a big chance for both two societies, peoples, to get a more mutual understanding.
All right, Mr. Kohut, I see you standing in front of a beautiful scenery in Prague. Wonderful over there. Great to have someone also from the Czech Republic, very first time for our program, in fact. So big congratulations. But on the other hand, what can we expect from your perspective?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Good evening from Prague, and I can only underline what was said. It's a really historical visit. So the Czech Republic, or the former Czechoslovakia, was the third country in the world which recognized the People's Republic in China, and now we have the excellent opportunity to welcome the President Xi Jinping here. In my view, it reflects the fast and speedy development and very positive development between China and Czech Republic in the last 3 years. Those years when we have the castle, which you can see behind me, President Miloš Zeman, who attaches a great importance to development and developing the relations with China, being it on the political level and also on the economic level. But we are going also to focus on the people-to-people exchanges.
Right. At this moment.
Second reason for the visit, I would say, this time is also the. Okay.
Mr. Kohut, is that what about the Belt and Road initiatives? Because I understand many in your country are expecting more to come with China's Belt and Road initiative for the development of the Czech Republic. At this moment, it's still a railway line linking Hungary and also Serbia, which also goes through the Czech Republic. What would that mean for your economy and your infrastructure?
First, I would say that it's a great initiative, Belt and Road, because it's not close to anyone. It's based on the inclusiveness. It's open to on the mutually win-win basis. So for the Czech Republic, it's a great opportunity to develop our ties with China and with other Asian countries. You have talked about mainly about the hard infrastructure, how I call it. That means the railways and roads, but we have to add to that, in my view, also the other layers of the One Belt, One Road, like the aviation Silk Road, communication Silk Road, academic Silk Road. So we have the Silk Roads in many layers. So it's a multi-level initiative in our views, and it's giving the opportunities on both sides.
Mr. Cui, though, all of these different layers of the Silk Road, whether it is railway or aviation or communication, has a lot to do with the time because we are only seeing the plan. So what could be the input from the other side, meaning the Czech Republic, to make sure that this Belt and Road initiative, when going through the Czech Republic, is going to work and also going to work on various layers? It's not just China putting the cash over there.
Yes, exactly. Because so far we can find so active attitude from Czech Republic to this initiative. And of course, as I understand that maybe there will not be every country in that region will join the transportation or railway, because I think this cooperation in the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative should take more some example with more cooperation between different countries. And of course, we need to reach a complementary cooperation, just like our Czech guest mentioned that from Czech Republic, maybe aviation, financial, and some other cooperation.
Yeah. But what does that mean? I mean,
yes.
Czech Republic, of course, is one of those quite significant countries in Central and Eastern European bloc, region rather. So what would that mean, China's intense exchange with this country mean for China's presence in the region and also China's future interaction with some of the others inside also Central and Eastern European countries?
Yeah, sure. We can take some, advantages of Czech Republic into account. For example, how about the geographic advantage of Czech Republic in Central Europe? So once there are more connectivity between Central and Eastern European countries, certainly Czech Republic will play very, very important role. And secondly, how about the very, very big tradition for manufacturing in Czech Republic? So now we are looking for more and more cooperation, especially when China want to have some more cooperation in the capacity of products. So I think there will be more complementary cooperation between China and the Czech Republic in manufacturing and even some technology.
We'll see what's going to happen. But it is not just the business ties, it's also the cultural ties, cultural exchanges and people-to-people exchanges as mentioned by our two guests coming from China and the Republic of Czech Republic have been quite, in a way, noteworthy. For the Chinese born in the 1970s and 80s, the little character in China-Czech, the first foreign cartoon series introduced into China, remained a very highly pleasant childhood memory. Meanwhile, Smetana's symphonic cycle Marvelast and also The Good Soldier Schweik are also familiar masterpieces in China. Last year, the two countries also jointly produced a new cartoon series called Cat and Panda. Well, a lot of new inventions over there also for the younger generation between these two countries. But having said that though, Mr. Cohen, I have to ask you, all these cultural exchanges sounds wonderful, but when you look at the history between the Czech Republic and China, one might find it in different stages. First of all, during the Cold War era, of course, the Czechoslovakia belonged to the so-called Soviet bloc. There were certain kinds of ups and downs in the relations. Then, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Czech Republic changed politically. Of course, the relations with China also varied as a result. And now we're looking at a very new stage of the bilateral relations. How would you interpret these ups and downs? What would that mean for the maturity, rather, of the bilateral relations? Mr. Cohen.
I have to say that the culture relation or the culture changes a part of our bilateral relations very important. So we have excellent political relations, we have excellent economic ties. It will be reflected by signing of the declaration of the strategic partnership. But we have to much more look into the mutual understanding between our great people and knowing more about our, let's say, rich history and culture. The Czech Republic is known in China, and China is very well known here. And there is a great interest in all the exhibitions which were here in the Czech Republic in the last couple of years, or the performances like was the Beijing Opera. So I think that entering a new phase of our bilateral cooperation and relations will also increase this type of cooperation, be it all the exchanges, or even, as you have mentioned, so the joint projects in the culture.
We've been talking about the beautiful present here, but it is only a mature relationship that one could be able to reflect back about the history and also look forward to the future. Therefore, I have to ask the same question to you again, Mr. Cui. What about the ups and downs in history over the past 6 and 7 decades in terms of the bilateral relations? How much would that, in a way, provide us with lessons and inspirations for the next stage of development?
Yeah, exactly. Indeed, I mean, for this bilateral relations between China and Czech Republic, we do have some difficult times in the past. I think that maybe the main obstacles for this bilateral relations is maybe a kind of a change of political environment, and especially how about the regional, situations, as we understand what happened in Europe in the past. And of course, I think that maybe in the past, especially from Czech side, always difficult to find how is a real understanding about the real China, because always people want to just look at China through we call the classes of ideology, or always maybe just a few Czech Republic people come to China, but they just think about China, okay, just like this or just like that. So I think it's a very, very big obstacle.
What about China? Would that be the same?
Yeah,
also,
certainly.
we're seeing Czech Republic with a certain kinds of perception.
Yeah, I think from Chinese side, to some degree, we are neglected to some degree, Czech Republic, because anyway, it's distant, and anyway, it's a small country, it's just with 10 million people. It's just like population like a Chinese city. So I think this time, of course, I think some political obstacles is cleared, and for China and the Central and Eastern European countries, including Czech Republic, now we are in a stage to rediscover each other and look each other as a new opportunity.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Rediscovering each other, Mr. Cohen, how much of rediscovering each other between China and the Czech Republic has to do with rediscovering of itself by the Czech Republic on the European continent rather, and also in your relations with the rest of Europe, for example, with the EU as well?
I have to say that it's really the last years are the rediscovering each other, and it was a very natural phase in our relations last 2 decades, I would say, before this entering new phase, because the Czech went through the reforms and reoriented after the changes here, mainly for being a member of the EU and the NATO, and somehow disappeared from the world stage and in many countries, and among them, of course, in China. So we are really now rediscovering in Czech the current contemporary modern China. And the same, I think, it's also for Chinese. For many, many years there was no direct flight between Beijing and Prague, and only now we have for last couple of months. So I think that the Prague is becoming more prominent in the let's say the plans of the tourists from China coming to Europe. And of course, as was mentioned, the culture is one of the keys how to open the souls and spirit of other countries, other nations.
All right. We also have Mr. Y with us coming from Chatham House. I understand that now our connection is okay. Mr. Y, help us to understand, I mean, Czech's choice in terms of its relations with the European Union. It is still not yet a member of it. Well, at the same time, it is one of those prominent ones already in Central and Eastern European, among Central and Eastern European countries. Help us to understand your understanding of Czech's status now in Europe, and what would that mean when it's eager to establish a much better and closer relations with China?
Well, I think the Czech Republic is clearly an important member of the European Union and sees itself and its foreign policy very much within that context. And of course, China's relations with Europe have improved considerably in the last few years, and all these things are coming together. As you were talking earlier about people rediscovering each other. These new communications, not just the physical ones of the Silk Roads, but also all the different ways that people are communicating with each other now, I think is opening new opportunities for deeper both understanding and cooperation between various countries. And I think in terms of the European Union's policies towards China and the Czech Republic's position there, it is an important one because it's one of the most developed of the CEE countries. It has strong links with both Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and as people have said, can act as a kind of bridge between the two, linking the two, not necessarily in a passive way, but in a very active way of encouraging further interactions.
Mr. Y, you understand very well that before, during, for example, during the Bush administration, there has been certain kinds of phrases being given to those that are traditional capitalist countries, developed economies inside Europe, and those coming from the former Soviet bloc. It was being named as the old Europe and the new Europe, so-called. Of course, we might not necessarily agree with those terminologies. Having said that, though, what is the role now Central and Eastern European countries play in the overall economic situation of the European Union, for example, and also its role in some of the most important decisions the European Union is facing right now, for example, about migration issues, about future currency coordination issues. Many of these, what is the role it is playing?
Life is becoming very much more difficult, you're absolutely right, for the European Union in the last few years. We have had these big challenges of the financial crisis, we have big challenges from migration, and the countries of Central and Eastern Europe have a different historical experience to those of Western Europe, but I think the significance or the importance of those differences is diminishing as we are growing more and more closely together, that our future lies in working together rather than in emphasizing the particular differences. And of course we come together on areas like China, where for all the countries in the European Union, and indeed for the European Union as a whole, the development of relations with China is an important aspect.
All right. And before we go, very briefly, from the other two guests coming from the Czech Republic and China, Mr. Cohen, what does it mean for the Czech Republic now to have closer ties with China in your search for your own identity from now on?
I would say that the desire to have much better relations with China than before, it's the reflection of the Czech national interests, and the current President Miloš Zeman and the current government, current coalition government, they are much more in favor of promoting the national interests, like many other countries in Central and Eastern Europe. It doesn't mean that we are somehow against the EU, although we have a lot of criticism as regards the, let's say, the management of the current migration crisis. Nevertheless, the promotion and the effort which we put into the development of relations between Czech Republic and China, and looking at them as the strategic for many reasons.
All right.
So it's clearly the reflection of the national interests.
All right. And Mr. Cui, final words.
Yes, exactly. I prefer to look at this visit by Mr. Xi just as an open, the beginning of the open door for wider cooperation with two countries. It's just not the end.
All right. Very interesting. We're looking forward to more information coming from that front, of course. Cui Hongjian, Zhang Hohat, and also Roderick Wai. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. We sit down with former U.S. Secretary of Defense William Cohen to discuss the importance of international trade agreements. We also chatted about the upcoming presidential election and why the Republican Party from the U.S. should push back against isolationist values. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. Talks on China-U.S. Bilateral Investment Treaty, or BIT, began in the year 2008. Though officials have said that many of the key stumbling blocks have been resolved, the agreement has yet to be signed after 24 rounds of negotiations. China and the U.S. are each other's largest trading partner, with total trade in 2015 reaching almost $560 billion US. One big reason why the BIT is highly anticipated by investors in both nations.
Sino-U.S. trade may have grown in leaps and bounds, but bilateral investment is still trudging a muddy path. Once finalized, the BIT should serve as an enormous boost to China-U.S. economic and political ties by paving an easier path for investment. Take, for example, the $43 billion acquisition of Swiss seeds and pesticide maker Syngenta by ChemChina. The U.S. Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States has been called to review the proposed deal over concerns that Chinese control could impact U.S. food security and farm interests. It will take at least 75 days for investors on both sides to move forward if the deal goes through. Investors say that a signed BIT would simplify international deals and reduce the number of hoops that investors have to jump through to work together. Concerns about national interests and how disputes should be resolved have held up the signing process, but hopes remain high that both China and the U.S. will clinch the deal, sooner rather than later.
Well, one of the fundamental challenges between the United States and China is a lack of trust that expands across economic and geopolitical concerns. William Cohen knows this very well. As a veteran of U.S. Congress, a former defense secretary, and now one of the most active business figures working between China and the U.S., he spoke very candidly about these realities during our interview at the Boao Forum for Asia. We also discussed the bilateral investment treaty, AIIB, and TPP, among many other agreements, and whether these mechanisms really have the potential to unite the two countries. Secretary Cohen, welcome to CCTV News.
Nice to be with you again.
Let's talk about building bridges, Secretary Cohen. China and the United States have been working on bilateral investment treaty, or the BIT. But the Chinese side has been urging the United States to finish this task for the current administration before it wraps up its term. Is it possible?
BIT is unlikely to be wrapped up during this term. It's been going on for now, I think, almost 8 years. They've been talking about this. Some 20 meetings have been held on the subject. There's more progress that's been made, but there's more to be made. President Obama and President Xi Jinping are meeting at the end of the month, and I know that something will be on the agenda for them to talk about, but I doubt if it can be concluded.
Where do you think then, Secretary Cohen, are the biggest challenges at this moment?
I think clarification in terms of what are the big issues that still remain to be resolved. I think there's still questions about national interests. I think there are issues about what's on the negative list, how many of the sectors are going to be excluded from the bilateral investment treaty. But I think that progress has been made. More progress can be made before the end of the president's term, but I don't think there's any way it could be completed, and I don't think it's going to be ratified during this term.
Well, you've got different kinds of mechanisms promoted by China and U.S. You got TPP, Belt and Road Initiative, you got AIIB, and some of the others. Some say these are apparently at least competitive mechanisms. So what do you make of it? Are we going to reconcile the geopolitical and the politics goals vis-a-vis the business benefits for all sides?
What I talked about during a panel discussion was that we still have what I call strategic mistrust. We don't trust each other. And so every motive is questioned. Each ambition is questioned. And so we look at each other through a different end of the lens. And so you're either bigger than you really are, or I'm smaller than I really am. And so what we have to do is to say, for example, TPP initially was seen by the Chinese as being an attempt to economically encircle China by lining up 12 countries on this treaty. We have looked, I know, at China's One Road, One Belt, as this is an attempt by China to create a sphere of influence, economic and geostrategic, to exclude the United States. Then we have the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. We looked at that as saying, well, that's trying to undermine the World Bank. And so each of us have to look at this and say, wait a minute, what is the goal? How can it be achieved? Does it work in our interest to be part of the Asia Investment Development Bank? And the answer, I think, is yes. Does it work in the interest of the Chinese to become eventually part of the TPP? That may be just esoteric and kind of just philosophizing about it now, because we don't see any movement made in the United States to take up TPP this year. So it becomes almost academic for the time being. But I think we have to look and see how each of these initiatives can work to the benefit of each country. And that only can come about through business, talking to each other and sitting down and working through our differences.
During President Bill Clinton's second term, William Cohen was appointed to the position of Secretary of Defense, a role Cohen served from the year 1997 to the year 2001. Cohen's election was regarded as an instance of a cabinet appointment that crossed party lines. That, of course, is almost impossible these days, with the Republican and Democrat parties hardly able to cooperate on anything. And even within the Republican Party itself, the division is deep and wide. That has been having an impact on the ongoing search for the party's nominee for the U.S. presidential election. Before we hear more from Secretary Cohen on this background information first.
Race of the Republicans. The latest poll has put Donald Trump as the frontrunner among candidates vying to become Republican nominee in the U.S. elections. Trump holds 37% among registered Republicans in California, according to a poll released Sunday. Texas Senator Ted Cruz follows with 30%, and Ohio Governor John Kasich trails with 12%. In a bid to win hearts in America's most influential pro-Israel lobby group, Trump declared his support for the Jewish state.
When I'm president, believe me, I will veto any attempt by the UN to impose its will on the Jewish state. It will be vetoed 100%.
Yet the Republican Party, whose nomination he is seeking, has fractured because of his candidacy. More than a quarter of registered Republicans in California say they would refuse to vote for him if he's the party's nominee. 1 in 5 Republicans said they would vote for Clinton over Trump in a general election matchup. With over 7 months remaining in a campaign of record-high divisions in the Republican Party, bringing the party back together is likely to be a difficult task.
As a veteran Republican, what do you make, Secretary Cohen, of the latest situation in the Republican primary?
Well, it's been disappointing in the sense that the debate itself has not been at a very high level in my judgment.
There's a big question mark on your head, and you can't do that to the party. You really can't. You can't do that to the party.
I think too often has been what we call ad hominem, namely very personal.
I will say even for Donald, though, he reached a new low. Donald, you're a sniveling coward, and leave Heidi the hell alone.
Very degrading at times, and a bit too crude in my sense, that I think the debate should be conducted at a much higher level.
How divided, Secretary Cohen, is the Republican Party now?
It's divided. How deep the divisions are remains to be seen. You have people on the right or the far right that are very ideological in the sense that they are not willing to bend on any issue. You have people who were once in the middle who no longer are there. So you have a situation in which there's been an inversion where virtues that were once celebrated, namely promoting free trade, promoting internationalism, promoting much more engagement in world affairs, has become something of a negative. Namely, there is a strong opposition now to free trade. There's also a movement underway on both parties, not only Republican but Democrats as well, to reduce our commitment, certainly at a military level, but to reduce our commitment to start reinvesting back at home. So it's one of pulling back, turning inward, right. And I think that that is not good for America, and it's not good for world stability. It's not good for our relations with China either. But that seems to be the prevailing sentiment right now. There's a lot of anger on the part of people who think that the future is not going to be as promising as it once was.
How much chance do you think Donald Trump would become the nominee of the Republican Party?
I think we have to anticipate he's likely to be the candidate of the Republican Party.
What would that mean?
Well, we don't know much about him in terms of what his philosophy is. It seems to be more isolationist, I think, than from what I can tell. He wants to focus upon rebuilding the infrastructure and the economy of the United States. Like most Republicans, he is concerned about the size of the national debt, which is $19 trillion. That should be of concern to China as well, since you have been investing in the United States. And so having a debt that continues to grow at $500 billion every year is not something that's sustainable. So focusing on that is important. But I think how we focus on it, not only what we say, but how we say it becomes important in diplomatic circles. So it's hard to say what his policy is. We barely know who his advisors are. As he has said, the only person he really consults is himself.
Some have been suggesting, Secretary Cohen, that the Republican Party has done it to itself. Look at what was going on before this. The Tea Party and all the political extremes, they say this is only a continuation of what happened over the past few years, the Donald Trump phenomenon.
I think it goes back to years ago during the Goldwater years in terms of looking at government as part of the problem and not as part of a solution. So there's been an anti-government sentiment, there's been an anti-bureaucratic sentiment. You rail against the bureaucrats in the system, and these are the people who make the wheels of government turn. And that's been going on for some years now. And so we have been sort of demeaning, always running against Washington rather than running for it. And the irony is people run for high office to get to Washington, so they say that they can either downgrade it or return power to the state. So it's been going on for some time. This is the culmination right now of what we're seeing.
How does the current situation, Secretary Cohen, compare to your time when you were serving as a Republican in a Democrat administration?
In my judgment, I don't think the United States has made a decision on what role it wants to play and needs to play in this century. I think there's great division taking place and debate taking place now. Should we be more engaged or less engaged? I think the world is more dangerous when we're less engaged. I think when we disengage diplomatically, economically, and even militarily, that creates a dynamic which is not in our interest. And to give you an example, in the Middle East right now, I think the perception is that the United States has been removing its presence. We've had President Putin move in and establish a military presence in Syria. And so that changes the dynamic in that region. The Europeans have felt that we were somewhat disengaged from Europe and no longer have their security interests as much in our upper mind as once did. And then we have the situation here in the Asia Pacific, of course, in which there's still questions about what the role of the United States is going to be, and what they call the Thucydides trap, namely when you have a rising power, which is China, and the United States being an established power. How do you manage that relationship? And historically, it has not gone well. And if you go back to all of the conflicts that have taken place in the past, so it's really incumbent upon business leaders as well as political leaders to say that we have to establish ties which will hold us together during tough and rough waters.
Secretary Cohen, where do you think the Republican Party is really going from here?
I don't like the direction in terms of the focus inward. I want to continue to focus on international trade, and I want to focus on building bridges, as we say, and not walls. And that sounds like an endorsement of Hillary Clinton, but it's not.
First time that you're Democrat.
But it's not. But no, I think we have to build relationships and not talk about how we're walling each other off from one another. And so I think the rhetoric has to be toned down, and I think the reality has to be toned down, that once someone gets to an office as high as the President of the United States, all of the statements that are made before, they become rather obsolete, in the sense the reality of governing a country becomes so complex and so important that you put away all of the mottos and the slogans you've used to get elected.
Well, you know, before we go, Secretary Cohen, you understand very well that the Chinese have been watching the American elections for quite some time. This year also. At this moment, we see that Hillary Clinton might be the one coming from the Democratic Party. Of course, Mr. Sanders could also have his chance. But on the other hand, the Republican Party, very likely Mr. Trump will be the nominee for quite extent. What would that mean if these two, or any of these two, become number one of the United States? What does that mean for U.S.-China relations?
Well, I think they're probably more comfortable at this point with Hillary Clinton in terms of they know her. She served as Secretary of State, First Lady in the White House, and a U.S. Senator. So her record and how she conducts herself is much clearer than Mr. Trump, whose record is one of being a private entrepreneur and business magnate. So we don't know much about his views other than what we've heard to date, which seem to be, again, more disengaged, more focused inward, more, I would say, isolationist in terms of pulling back from world involvement. We have to wait and see. I think if you look at it demographically, Mrs. Clinton has an edge going into the election, but much will depend upon how many people turn out. Does she have the same drawing power as Barack Obama? Does she have the same drawing power as President Bill Clinton? And that's to be determined. If they have a big turnout, then looking at it demographically between the black population, Hispanic population, young people, etc., you would think that she has the edge. But turnout becomes critical, and Donald Trump has a lot of momentum going right now. He may not become the nominee, but the chances are he will be. So I think everybody's going to sit back and say, what happens now?
Thank you so much, Secretary Cohen, for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That is William Cohen, former U.S. Secretary of Defense, a seasoned Republican who considers himself a moderate, talking about the U.S. recent primaries and U.S.-China political and economic ties. Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet with his American counterpart President Barack Obama later this week. That meeting is guaranteed to be under the world's spotlight. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You will be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.